Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. So today I got to admit to something. You guys recognize this knife? This is the one the new everyday carry pattern that I made that like 28-part series of videos on, start to finish how this is made, right? Well, I kind of decided to see how the other half lives, right? You guys know that I really love my toothy edge finishes, right? So, my normal everyday carry knife, my folder, it has still got my favorite DMT 325 grit edge with a micro bevel on it, right? Very toothy, amazing for everyday carry, very aggressive, just a really good all-around working edge for those of us that like aggressive pocket knives, right? This one, on the other hand, I decided to see how the other half lives. This one has worn a King 1000, 6000, it's wore the 6000 grit finish on this edge pretty much ever since I made it. This has been kind of a, I don't know, just a real big experiment for me. You guys know that I like, coarser edges, right? Because, I actually work with my knives, I wrecked the edge on this one, carving out a splinter, fiberglass splinter on a new takedown longbow that I just picked up. I was setting it up, putting felt on the limb tips, and then when I was trimming it, I caught a splinter. You guys know how hard fiberglass is on an edge of a knife. So, of course, once you splinter it, if you take a long if you splinter something like that, if you keep cutting into it, it'll just get deeper and deeper and deeper and, split out, right? So what you have to do is you have to come back from this other side and carve it out. You can see, that's where I rolled that edge, cutting that splinter out on that fiberglass. And fiberglass is really tough on an edge. And so anyhow, I just really wanted to see what the big hubbub was about. Since I like really toothy edges, I get an awful lot of, trash talk all the time. It's like, well, that's not sharp because it's only a 325 grit finish. Well, you can get a really sharp, really aggressive edge off of a file if you've got a soft enough, knife. It has more to do with the sharpness of the abrasive as to how sharp your knife is going to be, if that makes any sense. And we're going to take a look at that because I got the microscope out today. But anyway, so I just wanted to see for myself, hey, maybe I would like a higher grit finish. Everybody's always evolving. And just because somebody says, hey, I like Ford pickup trucks now, maybe down the road they decide, hey, I'm tired of picking stuff up way so high to get it into the bed of the truck. Maybe, want to try out a GMC or a Chevy pickup, that's got lower beds. It's easier to, you can tell I'm a GMC Chevy pickup fan. So anyway, so I have been carrying this knife with that 6000 grit finish now for, ever since I made the knife. So 6 months, something like that. And this video has been running around in my head, trying to kind of express my thoughts on this particular edge. I hadn't really been able to, come up with a way to express it. So what we're going to do is, since I wrecked the edge, we're going to go ahead and take a look at it underneath the microscope. We're going to go through the whole sharpening progression on this stone, from a 1000 grit to a 6000 grit. And then when we're done, I don't know, well, we probably won't cut anything. Or maybe we will, I don't know, we'll just have to see. But anyway, so we're going to see underneath the microscope the grit progression on this King 1000, 6000 grit stone. And I'll, talk a little bit about, what I've been liking so far and what I haven't been liking so far about this 6000 grit edge. And then I think it'll probably lead into, we might even do like a series of battle videos, so like rope cutting 325 versus 6,000, you know, see them, you know, duke it out and see which one comes out on top. Do the same thing with, you know, I don't know, maybe in the kitchen we'll go make, you know, like sausage and peppers, you know. That's a really good test of a knife because you got that, that kind of waxy skin on like bell peppers, you know, that's kind of tough to cut sometimes if your edge isn't on point. Anyway, so let's look at the edge first. Let's turn this on and hit that button. Take a look at the edge first, and that way we kind of get to see what it is that we're working with. And it's been a while since I did one of these videos, so we probably ought to pull the TV forward a little bit. There we go. That'll be close enough, I think. Okay, so now we got to find there's the spine. And you can see the scratches. This knife's actually held up pretty well. Usually I beat the crap out of my everyday carry knives, and so this one's done pretty good. I mean, it's just got some light scratching, some pitting up in here, I think. Where's my pen tip? Some pitting here and here and over there from when you know, I gutted out a fish and put it back in the sheath wet for a little bit. Okay, so here's our edge just on the side of this red box here. Now okay, you can see a couple of things here right off the bat. Let's get a pointer. This pencil will work just fine. Okay, so this right here is your blade finish, right? This right here is kind of your transition zone in between the hard steel and the softer steel, right? So this being 1095, this transition zone, so this from here to here is, you know, hard steel. I mean, at the working hardness that I selected with the temper, right? You still got pretty hard steel back into about here or so. After here, you know, you say it's soft, but it still gets some kind of a, like a flash hardening, you know, so as that oil boils, you know, because the hot blade is put into it, as that oil boils and turns to smoke or steam, as it rushes past, you will get some surface hardening with 1095 as that flashes, you know, and rises up. And then way back at the spine, it'll be quite a bit softer. But anyway, so that was just kind of an aside there. So this is the end of our finish. Okay, this right here is the beginning of our edge bevels. Okay, this, you can tell this scratch mark goes this way. That's when I hand sanded the blade. These scratch marks go this way. Okay, this right here is the edge, what I call the shoulder of the edge. All right, now you can kind of see that there's a little bit of wobble in here. You know, some places kind of get more abraded, or it could be that they, you know, that I cut something acidic and I kind of stain the edge a little bit. And then right up here is kind of the working edge portion. Okay, so typically in a lifetime of an edge, to begin with, you lay that edge back. So you've got a fairly thin cross section, right? And then as you use that knife, you can come back and then just kind of touch up the edge. And then kind of touch up the edge, and then kind of touch up the edge and touch up the edge until touching up the edge doesn't really work anymore. And then you go ahead and you grind in a new edge bevel, you know, from the edge all the way back. It's all nice and flat. And then you start the process all over again. So you can really tell right here that this is the rolled edge. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's go to where, see there? Okay, so this part right here, maybe you can't see that quite yet. That's a little bit better. Okay, so this part right here is the end of that edge being rolled over. Okay, so this edge right here is still okay. This part is where it was rolled over. Now that makes a whole lot of sense because I am right-handed. I was carving on that bow limb right-handed going like this. So that hard fiberglass rolled the edge towards us, okay? So if we were to, well, we might try, but this steel is kind of bent up like this. And we might be able to see that. Okay, so I tilted the knife this way, okay? So now we're kind of looking down at the side, and you can definitely see this bright line of steel right here. That's where I rolled the edge, and it's not where I did not roll the edge. Oh yeah, you can even see it. There's the spine of the knife right there. So you can really see how far over it is rolled. Okay. Now, you could take a steel, you know, like a sharp butcher steel, and you know, a butcher steel really doesn't abrade an edge very much. It just mechanically manipulates it. So instead of cutting that burr away, what a butcher steel would do is it would stand that edge. So if that's that burr, so instead of you know, abrading the burr off, you know, and making it new, a butcher steel would bend that burr back up. Okay, and so you would you know, work the knife on both sides of the butcher steel, okay, and you would get to align that edge back until it was, you know, straight in line and everything. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and put a fresh edge on here. So the stone's been soaking for, well, I don't know, half an hour or so. I came out and put it in the water when I came out to the shop this morning. Okay, so what we need to do first is we need to go ahead and grind in new edge bevels and do our shaping. Now this 1000 grit side, as far as the water stones that I'm familiar with, which is the King, the Norton, I think I've got a couple of Shaptons maybe, the Suhiro, that new Work Sharp water stone, you know, so an okay selection of water stones, I would guess. This King kind of falls in the middle, all right? I mean, it's not, I mean, it's much, much harder than, it's much, much harder than, like, say, a Norton silicon carbide or a crystalline stone, okay? It's denser because these particles are 1000 grit particles with a binder, whereas like a Norton is, the fine side is a 325-ish or so with a binder. So it's quite a bit finer and a little bit more dense and kind of harder. But now if I had any nicks or chips or anything like that, I would definitely want to break out the oil stone to get rid of those first. Otherwise, you're just sitting there wasting time on a fine grit stone. Okay, so that feels like I got a new bevel there and a burr. Okay, now you can see that there is, I mean, there's always going to be a slight amount of roll, okay? The human hand, I mean, we really aren't, I mean, in one way you can hold extreme angles, but in other ways, you know, when we're just kind of, you know, roughing an edge, you know, you will have some wobble back and forth, and that will end up kind of being like a very, very slight convex edge. But you can see there that we've got that burr formed on the other side. So if we come up here, or maybe I bent it over with my thumb. No, I didn't. See how that roll is all gone? There's a little bit back here, but that's just part of the burr that, or maybe it's a little bit left of it. The majority of our burr, though, is on the other side. Okay? So this last little bit right up in here, we'll go ahead and get that when we go ahead and kind of refine our edge on this 1000 grit side. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the other side. And here we're just grinding, okay? So it really does not matter if you do straight up and back and then, you know, kind of come over and work the tip, or if you go circles, you know, or if you kind of come back and forth like this, or if you sit there and do one stroke at a time like this, okay? At the moment, all we're doing is we're trying to remove steel to kind of flatten things out a little bit. And get a new edge bevel going. And a burr on the other side. Okay, and that feels pretty good. So now we should see it on the other side. Okay, so let's zoom in some. And let's dry that off a little bit. Oh, there it is. See how that's nice and one nice plane now going from the edge bevel, or the shoulder of the bevel, to the edge, and you can see little bitty bits and pieces of the burr on there. Alright, so I think the other side looks better because the light is, there's some of the fibers from the towel. There's a section right there, kind of a low spot where maybe I impacted that edge pretty hard. There's some of the burr that, you know, came up pretty hard on that side. So anyway, so we got most of our work done. Now we're going to go ahead. So now we start lightening up our strokes. Start paying a little bit closer attention to our angles. And start cleaning up our 1000 grit edge in eventual preparation for the 6000 grit side. Okay, so that moved the burr all the way over to the other side. That moved it back to that side. We'll do that one more time just because we saw those, you know, that impacted area, and then that area back in here where I was really hard on that fiberglass. Okay. Let's get you up here. Now, there's a couple things here. You can see how we've got kind of a double edge bevel here. Okay, so this right here was the last time that I laid the edge back, you know, thinned it out quite a bit. All right, so this time I didn't want to thin it all the way back out. You know, I just wanted to go here because I kind of figured the edge needed a little bit more toughness. But you can see now how nice and straight that edge is, and how you see those little bitty glints along the edge. Okay, that's you know, the burr and the weakened steel from the burr that's kind of, you know, kind of all wobbly right there. All right, we can kind of pull it back some more so you can see the rest of it. See how it's nice and even and uniform, and Now, even something that looks like that, you know, that looks nice and even underneath the scope, you are still going to have, you know, it won't be a perfect V. If it's done by hand, it's going to have some slight convexity to it, okay? Because every stroke is not at the exact angle. But that's more of a, you know, more of a like a nitpicking type of deal. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to do a little bit of what I call stone stropping. I think everybody else calls it stone stropping also. In other videos I've kind of explained this. If you were to shrink yourself down, like in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, okay, and stand right here at the corner, or you know, at the edge of this stone, and you were to look across the surface of the stone, okay, you would not see a clear mountain lake with no wind and just be complete glass, okay? You would not see that. You would see something that looked an awful lot more like, well, this is water stones with, you know, much finer, and it's a man-made water stone also. So what you would see would be something kind of like the desert, okay, where it's mostly sand, but there'll be a couple of big boulders here, there'll be some dips, there'll be some rises. You know, you'll be looking across that, right? Now, when you go and you take the edge and you try to carve a thin slice off the top of the stone, like, you know, in the Buck instruction manual, okay, that edge is going to be running smack dab into those boulders, okay? I mean, it'll go okay on the sand, and then all of a sudden, wham, it'll hit a boulder or a little knoll or something, right? And it'll kind of impact the edge. Same thing on the reverse side, all right? What we are trying to do here is we're using the 1,000 grit side to get us ready to go to the 6,000 grit side. Now, if you've got a 1,000 grit finish on there and then all of a sudden, wham, you run into a microscopic boulder, that's not really helping your cause out any, okay? So instead of running the edge into those boulders, okay, drag that edge over the top of the boulder. Now, the edge doesn't get impacted by it. Okay, you still get abrasion, but you're not impacting the edge. All right. So what we need to do is go ahead and do a couple of stone strops. And what this will do is really let, I mean, you're still putting, it's still 1,000 grit stone, right? But this is actually giving you 1,000 grit edge. Okay. Now, it might not, those boulders might not be made up of just the stone. I mean, they might be steel particles that came off your edge. They might be, you know, bits and pieces of, you know, some chicken crap that was still on your edge before you started sharpening. You know, they could be, you know, dust, you know, that falls on your stone from the air. You know, whatever they are, stone stropping lets you ride over those boulders instead of smashing into them. Okay? So now we can look at that edge with the stone stropping. And you can see how it looks pretty much the same, only there's a little bit, everything's a little bit more even. And that burr is still there, and that's good. We're going to use it in the next step. So we are done with the 1,000 grit side. Now we need to go to the 6,000 grit side. Now the 6,000 grit side, you can see here this black stuff, okay? That is steel particles from the last knife that I sharpened on the 6,000 grit side, okay? The 1,000 grit side, it releases abrasive fast enough to where you don't really get a whole lot of that. You get some, but it's a darker stone, so I think it blends in a little bit better. The lighter side, the 6,000 grit side, it's not quite as soft, and so it doesn't release abrasive fast enough so that you don't end up loading the stone up. All right. Now the easiest way to get rid of that is to take, I like these Harbor Freight stones for this. We'll do the 600 grit side. Okay, and that what you do is you pretty much just abrade off the top layer of that stone. And you clean it all. I mean, you're not cleaning it so much as you are getting rid of the dirty layer of stone. Okay? Now you've got a clean stone surface. Okay? Now, there's two different ways that you can really go about this. And it's really entirely up to you. That was the camera timing out. You can go ahead and remember our burr is still there, but it's standing straight up pretty much because we stropped it on the stone. So you can go ahead and work one side until you feel the burr, work the other side until you feel the burr, then stone strop a couple of times and then finish off the edge. Or honestly, you can go ahead and just stone strop, you know, maybe 10, 20 times on each side and get the majority of the benefit that way. So actually, let's go ahead and do that second method first, and then we'll take a look at the edge, and then if we feel like it, then we'll do the first method. So let's hit this button. Well, no, let's go ahead and sharpen it. Now you can see that black showing right off the bat on the stone. That's your steel coming off your edge. That means the stone's working. Even the 6,000 grit side is fairly aggressive for a 6,000 grit stone. Okay, now, going point to heel on a short stone, I don't think you ever really get up in here. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and work just that spot a little bit. And then we'll kind of blend it in. Okay. I'll turn the camera back on. Okay, now see how much, right off the bat, see how much shinier that is? It's, I think the reason it looks darker is because it's a higher polish, and so that light is hitting it and glaring off of it versus, well, you know how like when you look, you know, when the sun is bright outside and, you know, you got you know, there's snow on the ground and you just can't hardly see because the sun is beating down on that white surface and it pretty much blinds you. That's kind of what's happening right here. Okay, so we might have to kind of move the edge around a little bit. You can still see that we've got the double bevel here going on. And you can also see that stone stropping, I hold at a slightly higher angle when I stone strop than when I grind. Because this here, sorry, I'm trying to hold the knife at one time and then point at the same time. So, so this here is when I was grinding, and this here is when I was stone stropping. Okay? But you can see that there's very few glints along the edge now. Because now instead of a 1,000 grit burr, we're looking at a 6,000 grit burr, okay, which is much, much, much finer. Let's see if maybe the other side gives us any, if it looks any different. Ah, there. Now see, it looks to me like I'm much more even on my stone stropping coming towards me than I am going away from me. But that's a pretty nice, nice polish on that edge there, even without, you know, doing a scrubbing motion on the stone. So we might just call it good with that. Okay, so now we have got an edge that was created by a 1000 grit stone, then stone stropped to maximize the 1000 grit edge. Then we went straight to the 6000 grit side. We cleaned the stone off so that, you know, there's no extra gunk or anything on there. And then we just stone stropped, what was that, 10, 15, 20 times a side, something like that, to really kind of polish that scratch pattern from the 1000 grit stone away. So now what we have is a 6000 grit burr that is very nicely aligned with the rest of the edge. Okay. Now this edge right here will probably take hair. Oh yeah, see? It's taking plenty of hair, right? But the second you go to actually cut anything with that edge, anything, you know, I mean, it would cut meat okay, it would probably cut paper okay, you know, anything soft would be all right, maybe even fabric. But the second you put that knife to anything harder than that, so like let's say you tried to sharpen a pencil, okay, that wood would just roll that 6000 grit burr over, and then it wouldn't be near as sharp anymore. So there's several different methods that you can use to get rid of that burr. You can do a micro bevel. Micro bevels really don't work as well as what you would think that they would on soft stones like this. That is much more a technique for diamond stones, or for like a stone that doesn't release grit very well. So like your Arkansas stones, as long as they're nicely conditioned and they are cutting good, work really good for a micro bevel. So micro bevels on soft water stones, I mean, you can get them to work, but they're not near as consistent as they are on a harder stone. Okay, you can work that edge back and forth on a strop. Okay, what you're doing when you do that is you're work hardening that burr, because you move it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You work harden that burr until it snaps off. Okay, now microscopically, you might not even be able to see, you know, the individual teeth of where that burr snapped off, because you're already dealing with a 6000 grit burr. Okay, so as that 6000 grit burr gets bent back and forth, when it snaps off, it might leave, you know, a 10,000 grit edge. So something very tough to see, but you can definitely tell it in use, I think. Because then you get like a polished edge that's kind of sort of polished, so it doesn't really have teeth, but then the teeth that it does have are kind of inconsistent, and it, to me, it's not a very pleasant edge. The other way you can do it is you can go ahead and rip that burr off of the edge and then come back and polish out the parts where the steel got ripped away. That is the method that Murray Carter uses when he uses this stone, and that's who I learned this sharpening technique from, his videos, so that's what we're going to do. Hey, hush, we're shooting a video here. So we need a piece of soft, fairly clean wood. We're going to go ahead and use the edge. This is a 2x4 that I've got the stone on. If you're in the kitchen and you don't have any, you know, a 2x4 or something handy, don't use a kitchen counter. You can use the rubber off the bottom of your shoe. Can you see my there it is. Yeah, there's my shoe. That rubber will work pretty good to rip a burr off. Just very lightly drag that edge through the rubber or the wood a couple of times, and that will knock that burr off. I don't know if we can see it. You can kind of sort of see a little bit of roughness in here. just a little bit, and some kind of light glints. That could be it. Let's get a little bit closer. I've actually never tried to see that before. Okay. So yeah, we do have little bitty bits right here that kind of look like they're torn. Alright, so now that we ripped that burr off, now we need to go back and kind of fix those. So what we do is we stone strop 2 or 3 times on each side, nice and lightly. Okay, that's 2 times on each side. Now let's see what we get. Isn't that funny how you can pick the knife? Oh, there it goes. You can pick the knife up and you can set it back down, and without moving anything, you get a totally different picture. And that kind of looks to me like maybe I stone stropped that last little bit at a little bit higher angle. But pretty much that is, you know, a pretty nicely finished 6,000 grit edge. We'll just kind of move it around a little bit so you can kind of see it in different lights. And that's got a little bit of the 1,000 grit edge showing back through. You can see right up in here. Which honestly, I mean, this is a good working edge. You know, it's going to work pretty good. We'll do the mandatory, you know, shave some hair off Joe's arm test. And it pops hair pretty good. So, you know, I mean, I want to say that's about it. So that's how you do, you know, the 1,000, 6,000 grit edge on this knife. I think we're already at like 37 minutes or so, so I'll probably go ahead and cut this off, and then I'll probably think up of some nice, you know, comparison tests, you know, where we put the 6,000 grit edge against 325 grit edge on rope, leather, paper, wood, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll just kind of see. I will say that I was very surprised that a 6,000 grit edge off of the King, you know, 1,000, 6,000 grit stone, it was surprisingly still toothy and still aggressive and kind of really, it's still an aggressive edge, but it's not the ripping and tearing aggressive edge like what I'm used to. It's much more like, let's say you go from a, you know, compare it to saws and the teeth on a saw. So my normal 325 grit edge would be like a, you know, like a 10 tooth per inch, you know, like a carpenter saw, you know, something that you would use for cutting 2x4s in half by hand. And then that 6,000 grit edge is much more like a 24 tooth per inch blade on like a hacksaw. Okay, so you try taking that hacksaw with a 24 tooth per edge blade on it and try cutting a 2x4 in half, and you'll be there for an awful lot longer than you will with the carpenter saw with a 10 tooth per inch edge or tooth pattern on it. But that isn't to say that this is not a pleasant working edge, and I've actually grown to kind of like it. It's still not, I don't like it quite as much as I like my 325, but it is a very serviceable edge. So I think that's about enough for this video. That's about 40 minutes, and I suppose I should probably get my butt to hand sanding. I got like 8 of these chefs here that all need hand sanded and get ready to fit handles on. So anyway, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video. if you've got any ideas for the comparison contest between the 6,000 grit edge and the 325 grit edge, let me know in the comments. That I think is going to be mighty exciting over the next couple of weeks. Anyhow, we will see y'all later.